AMD are certainly known for releasing some very strange and pointless graphics cards, but nothing may be more useless than them releasing the smallest graphics card I've ever seen, and the best bit about it, it doesn't even have any graphics outputs. Now this right here is my Radeon R5 330 that I ordered off of CEX for just £10, and the only reason I got it is because I have never heard of this card before, and after a little bit of digging, it seemed like a clever AMD idea to get rid of some more GCN chips, with the clever tagline of uplift graphics performance, and then in very small font on their own slide, with no display output, even going as far as bragging that it was the same technology used in the Xbox One and the PS4. Really quite optimistic stuff. And honestly, this has got to be one of the smallest graphics cards ever produced. I mean, look at it, it's absolutely minuscule. But today, 10 years after this thing ever came to be, it's been very difficult to get it working, with no graphics output and no support from AMD. So what I've done for you is I've taken the R5 330 and I've condensed 3 hours worth of troubleshooting to try and get it to work into just 3 minutes. As this thing, well, in the modern world, it has some seriously major issues. I'm assuming if we put just a random display card in the top slot, and then if we chuck this one in the little slot next to it, then we take this weird dongle, then we plug in a HDMI, and hopefully that'll give a display. It's just turned off. And using a random graphics card that I've just found in a cupboard might be a bad idea, but I don't know where it's outputting from. It seems wrong, but what if we just use the RTX graphics card? Yeah, okay, that's posted. So now we've got to get to Windows and find out if it shows up as a graphics card, and then try and figure out how it works. Is the fan's not even working on that card? Oh no, the fan is working because I've just put my hand in it. Do we go to AMD drivers? Detecting for drivers. This should mean that if this bit works, it will pick up the video controller. Yep, it has. Full install. Oh. It just updated. R5 M320. Oh, it really... it blue screened. Thread stuck in device driver. So that sounds an awful lot like this doesn't work. Oh, the welcome screens. Yeah, it's in a blue screening loop now. Because all we want it to do is use it as a port. We don't want it to do any of the actual processing. So technically this should work. Okay, GPU Jet revision, Pegatron. Okay, so we've got it working. So what we've got is we've got Radeon. This thing is just weird. It works. Somehow, it works. It blue screened again. It's a really, really interesting development that it's going to carry on doing this. A bug report could be generated to AMD. Yeah, you know what, AMD, why don't you figure it out? Okay, I've figured out a way for it to work. As long as I run Valley... No, it just crashed before it even got to Windows. 12 times the charge. These are on the same set of drivers. Is it going to crash? Again! This is like the most ideal setup. Okay, we're back in Windows. GPU Z, come on. Okay, that's disabled. It should put load on the other card. Yes. 18%, 0%. 27. That's working. That is doing something now. Here's the current situation. It is working with a slightly newer version of the same architecture it's based on. That card is then disabled so that it is only being used for the HDMI port. If you don't disable it, the PC will not use the one you want to test. But if you leave it enabled or disabled, it has the effect of unless that card is being used, it will crash the PC. So the only thing you can do is to launch something that runs a graphic as soon as the PC is turned on, otherwise it blue screens. The moment you close a program, it will blue screen. This is the only instance it works. I understand this was not what it was designed for. It's the only thing that works. This is the only thing that I found that will work. Now, it appears the main way for this to function was either in an Intel system as a gaming device or OpenCL accelerator, think Blender and things like that, or in an AMD A8 system where it could run with Crossfire and attempt to improve the onboard graphics, a feature that was very much of its time and given that a lot of the integrated graphics on those chips were actually too good for their accompanying processors, this was a questionable decision at best. Unfortunately, this card would not output though. In any other system I tried when trying to utilize the iGPU like it's meant to be used, it simply doesn't work. And this was a documented issue back in the day. That's why these things are quite rare now, is purely because they didn't work well when they came out, and most people just binned them. So it's a bit of a weird one. I mean, AMD did boast about the performance it offered, so surely it's got to be doing something. It's also worth noting that the specs it shows on Windows will vary at random. You can give it the right drivers and call it the Radeon 5 330, but it'll blue screen eventually and it'll reset the name. The name doesn't matter, it works the same regardless. So what actually are the specs of this R5 330? Released actually not too long ago, back in 2015, it appears this was a mobile chip that AMD stuck onto a tiny PCB, and its specifications do definitely reflect that. It has 320 cores, 20 TMUs, 8 ROPs, and I know AMD called it dedicated memory, but it is just a woeful 2GB of DDR3 built on board. Hardly anything that can do any real accelerating. Weirdly enough, this may be the only time you will ever see the EXO variant of the GCN architecture on a desktop. It does somehow boast support for DirectX 12 though, and Vulkan, so it's very odd to see a chip this basic with so many modern features make its way to an actual desktop graphics card. The one upside is that it does use under 30 watts with full load, which explains its minuscule size, and the main downside is that there is no display output, making this in 2024 probably the most useless graphics card to own. It's got display adapter specifications, but it's not actually a display adapter. Now, the benchmarks for this card were exceptionally difficult to do, and performance was anywhere from not too bad to downright awful, having to monitor exactly what the card was doing constantly to make sure the performance we were seeing was actually utilizing this tiny R5. But eventually we had everything set up, and these may be some of the most downright buggy, non-repeatable tests that I've ever done, so I hope you enjoy what can only be described as some of the most abysmal and confusing things I've ever seen in the benchmarks. Starting off the benchmarks with BeamNG, which we managed to run with the lowest settings in 720p, and we were off to a relatively good start. It is worth noting that during this benchmark I did do it with the RTX 4060 as the output before it became too unstable. Not that the performance really changes much when you swap to an AMD output or anything that will actually pass the signal through, but the game was playable in simple instances, and it wasn't too awful. I mean, it tended to stick to a playable frame rate. Larger maps, and really any map with a degree of complexity, would bring you down much closer to the mid-20s, so a fairly awful experience overall, but one that was for the most part somewhat playable in places. A best case scenario for this card seems to be things like Counter-Strike Source, where it will quite happily run maxed out in 1080p with ultra settings, and we could see anywhere from 80 through to 120 FPS, and the same could also be said on actual servers where we would stick around this figure. This was one of the few titles where we could run the game in full screen with absolutely no problems, as most titles tend to have major frame rate stability problems the moment the card actually tried to output to a full screen, which was lucky to be honest, as this game had one problem. It was locked into running 1080p in full screen, so I'm really glad it actually worked for that. So Counter-Strike Source actually shows where this card was useful. It let you max out some of those classic titles on what is just a little card that sits inside your PC, which really paints it in the most optimistic picture possible. But this is the moment where the actual ease stopped. With GTA 5 it took forever for us to dial in some settings that would work, and even going as far as to whip out the config file and manually tweak things lower than they should go. Even when we had things as low as possible and locked the game into a 240p window with no shadows, which did fix the awful input latency and did give us a remarkably stable frame rate, settings higher than this would induce back awful latency regardless of the setup we used. Trust me, I did try this on later systems and different drivers, and it doesn't matter what you do. When the R5 330 is your output, settings higher than this will cause input latency that I haven't seen since I tested this on old laptops. So maybe that's why those issues exist, because this is a laptop graphics card whacked into the PC. Anyway, this was about as good as we could get out of the R5 330. It doesn't look great, but it was playable. Skyrim was a tad better, with the game actually managing a decent 720p resolution with a mixture of low and medium settings, which is about what you'd expect from a low-tier Radeon card of the era. It usually hovered around 40 FPS, but could go higher or lower than this depending on what was going on. It doesn't matter that you've got 2GB of VRAM, when the VRAM is actually slower than your system memory, and has been slower than system memory for about a decade. The game didn't feel as smooth as the frame rate would suggest, but then again, MSI Afterburner had issues, so we are stuck with fraps here, which doesn't really reveal as much information as you'd like when you are trying to benchmark the game and you're just seeing one number on screen. But anyway, it ran, it was in high definition, and it didn't use the lowest settings, so I suppose we can call this a success. Miraculously, Baldur's Gate 3 did actually start and run. Not well, mind you, and it took an eon to load in, but when we got in-game, it was a very low frame rate, and the most optimistic thing I could say is that it was somewhat controllable in places. Occasionally at times we could see it flash up with 10 FPS for a very brief moment before dropping back to our average of 8. It's not fantastic, but it did start and it did run. Next up we had Fable: The Lost Chapters, which seemed too good to be true. We had it running with ultra settings in 1080p and no issues or slowdown, up until the graphics card decided to possess the entire system and it was now in full control of whatever was happening. Only it wasn't affecting the mouse, only the keyboard, so the game looked great and the frame rate was perfect, but you can't actually play the game, as no matter what I tried to do, the card would simply possess whatever you were using to control the game. You could unplug the keyboard, and it would still decide to do random things. I thought it was buffered inputs, but nope, it is just the graphics card taking control here. I have no idea what it's doing. Genuinely, my hands weren't touching anything for a lot of this, I was just leaving it to do its own thing. Maybe there's some new speedrunning strats in here, but ultimately, the best experience so far isn't even worth playing. Flight Simulator actually pulled a miracle and launched, but managed to spend so much time loading slowly it forgot where the files were, decided it had enough, threw up a random error, and then crashed. But ultimately, can this minuscule graphics card play Crysis? Well, in an 800x600 window with medium and high settings selected, the card just about managed a fully playable experience with a frame rate that actually wasn't anything to scoff at. Full screen and higher resolutions would decimate the performance, so if you squint really hard, you can actually see a pretty decent looking game. It didn't crash though, and we could actually control things, so somehow the strange performance continues. Despite the fact that some old titles are completely unplayable, some new ones start, somehow, Crysis remained one of the most playable experiences on the card, and actually ran with some of the high settings selected, which is absolute insanity. So there we have it, some actual benchmarks on the sheer power of this weird displayless graphics card. And trust me when I say attempting to test this card by itself is near enough impossible. It took forever just to test a few games, as if I left the card idle for too long, it would simply blue screen, and we would have to test it all over again. All the while we were in-game, there weren't any problems. The issues would only start the very moment it was just displaying a desktop and began to power down. And how would I rank the performance? Well, it performs just like a 10-year-old laptop GPU. Source games like Half-Life 2 will run fine maxed out, as long as you scale down the resolution appropriately, which may have actually been fine on a 13-inch laptop screen, but can look fairly awful on a full-size display. Modern titles hardly start, and games from the era of its release will require configuration mods just to get a playable frame rate. Sure, the card is more or less silent and uses 30 watts, but all of these issues make the performance near enough redundant. It doesn't offer any extra features, there's no AMD VCE or anything like that here, and when there's so many cards on the low-end side of the market, especially right now, there is no reason to buy this card today. There really is very little else I can say. There's nothing more I can actually test. I mean, all I can do is say it's absolutely dire. That truly is. Sure, I can understand that maybe, just maybe, when paired with an AMD pre-built in the era, it might have actually improved performance ever so slightly, but when AMD was already offering the HD 7750 in 15 million forms, this really was just a clever way of bundling off unsold laptop chips. I'll keep it around, and maybe if I do find one of those pre-builts, we'll test it to see how it performs in a more contemporary setting. But today, I don't know how many of these they sold. I know that some of them ended up in Intel systems of the era that would have suffered with the same problems we had today, and you'd get more or less the same experience. It's very rare that I say do not buy a card on this channel, as usually for a low enough price there's a reason to get one. But here, it doesn't do the very one thing a video card is meant to do. It can't make any video. How much money was genuinely saved by not putting a DisplayPort on here? HDMI I can understand, you have to pay licensing for, but the lack of even an open source display feature, it makes this card completely redundant. Maybe if you have a dying GPU and you've got one of these on hand, you could enable some sort of pass-through like we've done today. That's the only use case I can think of if you already own one and you have a dying graphics card. But just go and buy a working Radeon card. There's plenty under £10, which is less than that'll set you back for one of these on average. They'll probably cost you less. It's a weird one to make this video because it's an interesting concept that has been abandoned, and 10 years later is just completely pointless. I think, I have no idea. I'm lost for words. I actually am sat here just lost for words on what to actually say about it other than it is terrible. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this truly awful experience. Good night.